We are in Rouen, France. It is the capital of Normandy, a northwest region here in France. We're a bit far from all the World War II stuff. That'll be covered in a future vlog. This city, though, is known for two things mainly: Joan of Arc and the cathedral that was made famous by the Impressionist painter Monet. To get to the main attractions, you walk, but that's a good thing. The streets are almost as they were 500 years ago. And there are about 250,000 of these half-timbered buildings. Many of these buildings include second floors that overhang the first floors. Apparently, the buildings were built this way because it gave more room to the inhabitants on the second floor, but it was determined in 1524 that the risk for fire and plague was too great, so they stopped the practice of building houses this way. Rouen is one of the places where the famous Joan of Arc solidified her place in history. But who was she? Before heading to some spots that retrace her steps in the city, how about a quick Cliff Notes version of her life? She was a young teenage girl in the early 1400s, credited with helping France keep the English from taking the country over. She began life as a peasant girl in northeast France around 1412. When she was only about 16 years old, she wanted to be taken to the future King Charles VII to help save France from the English. She said she was being guided by Michael the Archangel and Saints Margaret and Catherine. The king was so impressed by her, he did send her to the battle that was going on in Orléans. While the then 17-year-old didn't lead the French army, she waved her banner and brought hope to the demoralized French soldiers. The English abandoned the siege of the city 9 days after Joan arrived. Another victory, thanks in part to Joan, led to Charles's coronation with Joan at his side. But two unsuccessful battles afterwards led to her being captured by French allies of the English and then turned over to the English. She was tried by a pro-English church court and charged with witchcraft and blasphemy. They declared her guilty, and she was burned at the stake on May 30th, 1431. She was only 19. May 30th is now celebrated as the Feast of St. Joan of Arc in many local and regional church calendars, especially in France. A quarter of a century later, her verdict was overturned, but that was far too late for Joan. She is now revered as a martyr, an early feminist, and a symbol of freedom and independence. Nowadays, there are lots of reminders of her importance throughout the city. She was imprisoned in Rouen Castle's tower, which is the only piece of the castle left. Do yourself a favor, spare yourself about an hour plus to check out this virtual reality exhibit on Joan of Arc. Bummer part about the exhibit is that I couldn't actually show you any video. I just took some stills so you can get an idea of the kind of things that you see on the virtual tour. Through the magic of multimedia and creative use of the space, you're taken to the time of her exploits on the battlefield and her trial, complete with people playing the parts of her accusers and defenders. Through holograms, we also hear from historians about her impact on arts and history, as well as politics. But overall, you get the sense of the impact this young woman left. She was so ahead of her time. The museum was an archbishop's palace dating back to the 11th century and is the actual place where Joan was condemned to death. It's also where her sentence was overturned 25 years later. Go to the Place de Vieux Marché and see the spot where she was burned at the stake. The church next to it is aptly called Church of St. Joan of Arc. Its design is a stark contrast to the architecture in the city because it was built in 1979. The curves are meant to represent the flames that ended Joan's life. Its shape resembles an overturned boat, a lot like the way early Christian churches were designed. The boat was a Christian symbol. Undoubtedly, one of the reasons people come to Rouen is this cathedral. Construction started in 1030. Yes, that was 1,000 years ago. But it was only really finished in 1880. And when it was done, it was the tallest building in the world. But what really put this magnificent Gothic church on the map? The Impressionist Claude Monet painted this cathedral more than 30 times in the 1890s. Why so many? The artist wanted to show how a subject changed in appearance depending upon the time, and that included painting during different seasons. Another church that's a must-see is St. Maclou and the neighborhood around it. It does feel like a step back into the Middle Ages. Steps away from the Church of St. Maclou is an area where as many as 6 million people are buried. This was built because the church cemeteries were overwhelmed when the Black Plague hit in 1348. A third of all the people in Europe lost their lives. And here in Rouen, 75% of the population. Over the next 2 centuries, people continued to be buried here. Walk around and you see reminders of what this place holds. You see bones and skulls carved into the facade. One of the interesting things you'll find here, a mummified cat that was found in the walls. Part of a tradition. It's assumed that this was a black cat, which was believed to ward off evil spirits. I just had to tell you about this interesting story about the Tour de Beurre, or Butter Tower. There's 2 thoughts on why it's named this. One is maybe it's because it's a little bit yellower than the rest of the church. Second, it's thought that a bishop was trying to pay for the construction by asking people to donate. And the donations would allow these people to waive the restriction of not eating butter during Lent. A lot of the sauces here require butter, and some people didn't want to skip on that. So pay a little, and you can skate on your Lenten sacrifice. If you want to walk amongst this half-timbered building oasis and get a sense of what the city was known for, walk along the Eau de Robec. You'll notice the overhang at the top level of many of the buildings. This is where the textiles that were being produced here were more protected against rain when they were drying. One of the top attractions here is Le Gros-Horloge. In English, that translates to Great Clock, which is pretty apropos when you see it. It was made in 1389, but was not installed till 1527. It does make it one of the oldest astronomical clocks in Europe, which means it shows the time, but also the position of the sun and the moon. Now, what's kind of fun is checking out the behind the scenes of this mechanical wonder. Go through the dials room, the bells chamber, and if that's not enough incentive, get a breathtaking view of the city from the top of the belfry. I hope you enjoyed this quick visit to Rouen. It was only a few hours, but we have now a real appreciation of the importance of Joan of Arc, not just to the French, but really to the entire world, and the importance of that cathedral behind me, thanks to Monet. À la prochaine. See you next time. Thanks for joining me on Mary Goes Round the World. Here's my tip of the week for you. It's about timing. Come Monday, come Tuesday, you're going to miss out on some museums because they're closed. And the cathedral tours are only operating on the weekends, and then there's times in the middle of the day the cathedral's closed, except in the peak season. Then they're supposed to be open all day. That's my tip of the week. Any day, though, in Rouen is wonderful. A nice way to check out the city is through this audio guide I picked up from the tourism office. I wanted a personal guide, but they weren't available today, so this is the next best thing.